This Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. And this Rosh Chodesh we all know because it is mentioned in the Mishnah in the beginning of the fourth parak and time is that Misha Nichnas of Mematim B'Simcha. All kind of halachas that kick in Misha Nichnas of, which is Rosh Chodesh of. But it's noteworthy that this Rosh Chodesh is already mentioned in Torah Shebechsav. In this week's parsha, in Parshas Masei, as it says, Vayal Aharon Hakohen el Hor Hahor al Pi Hashem, Vayomos Shom b'Shnas Ha'arboim l'Tzeis b'nei Yisrael me'Eretz Mitzrayim b'Chodesh HaChamishi ba'Echad LaChodesh. So Aaron died on b'Chodesh HaChamishi b'Echad LaChodesh, Rosh Chodesh Av. So the Yahrtzeit of Aaron actually is the only Yahrtzeit that appears in the Torah. And you know that Torah is miloshin hoyra'ah, like the Zohar says, begin the oiri. Torah is instruction. The Torah doesn't just share information that is not that there's no lesson to. So there must be something that we ought to learn from the fact that Aaron HaKohen was nifter on Rosh Chodesh of. Actually, this is not the first time that this date is mentioned in the Torah. Rosh Chodesh Av is mentioned already earlier. Why? Because in Parshas Noach, when the Mabel was winding down, it says, "V'hamayim hoyu holoich v'chasor ad hachodesh ha'asiri, ba'asiri ba'echad lachodesh niru roshei hahorim." The tops of the mountains were seen ba'asiri ba'echad lachodesh. Rashi over there explains that Ba'asiri means the Asiri le Marcheshvan, which is the 10th month of the Mabul. And that is Rosh Chodesh of Ba'asiri Be'echad LaChodesh, Rashi says, is Rosh Chodesh of. So is there a connection between the fact that Aaron was nifta on Rosh Chodesh of and the fact that on Rosh Chodesh of, when the Mabul came to an end, there was Niru Roshei Hahorim. So obviously I don't know, but nevertheless, it is interesting that Rosh Chodesh Av was Niru Roshei Hahorim, and by Aharon HaKohen, the Torah tells us, Vayal Aharon HaKohen el Hor Hahor, al Pi Hashem, Vayomos Shom. And as the Torah already told us in Parshas Chukas, Kaches Aharon ves Elozor benoi, Vahal Oisom Hor Hahor. And Vayas Moshe kasher tziva Hashem vayalu el hor hor la'enei kol ha'eda vayomos shom Aharon vayomos Aaron shom berosh hahor. So Ba'asiri be'echad lachodesh niru roshei hahorim in the end of the Mabul, and on that same day vayomos shom Aharon berosh hahor. So maybe there is some. Maybe there is some connection between these two things. You know, by Moshe Rabbeinu it says in the end of Parshas V'zos Abracha, "Vayikbar oisoi bagai mul beis por v'lo yoda ishes k'vrosoi ad hayom hazeh." So Aaron died and he was buried berosh hahor, and on hor hahor, as Rashi says in Parshas Chukas, that it's a hor al gabe hor. And Moshe, in spite of the fact that he was Nikbar Bahar Nevoy, as Rashi explains, but he was buried in a gai, which is like a valley, which is an indentation in the Har. So, not that we understand why Aaron is covered Berosh Har and Moshe is covered Bagai. But I just want to mention that the Gemara says in Psachim Daf Peches that Avram Avinu called the Makom HaMikdosh, he called the Makom HaMikdosh Har, as it says in the end of the Maisa HaKedah, Asher Omer Hayoim Bahar Hashem Yeroh. So Bahar Hashem Yeroh. So Avram Avinu refers to the Makom HaMikdosh as Har, a mountain. Now, it's Mavur and Svarim, it already appears in the Megala Amukis and probably in earlier sources the idea of Har. Why is Avram Avinu shaykh to the Indian of Har? Because the midah of Avram Avinu is the midah of Chesed and Ahava, as the pasuk says, Avraham Ohavi, and Har is a symbol of Ahava. Not clear why is that. It could be because the Har, comes out of the karka. In other words, it's in a tzura of exiting the self, lifting up from the karka, and therefore Har is the midah of Ava, and therefore Avram was koroi Har. The Balatani in the Torah or in Parshas Tetzaveh writes that the Ava that Aaron instills in Nishmas Yisrael is Ava Rabba, which is beyond Avas Oilam, which is the natural Ava that Avram Avinu was mamshich in Nishmas Yisrael. He also talks about the fact that Aharon has the word Har, Aleph and Nun in the beginning and the end of the word, but in the middle we have the word Har. In any case, it could be that that's why Aaron is covered on the Hor, a Har on top of a Har, because that's the midah of Ava Rabba, not Avas Oilam, but Ava Rabba. Now, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin Davavam at Beis, Rebbe Elazar ben Noshel, Rebbe Yossi Aglili Omer, Osur Livtzoya. Livtzoya means to make a pshara. He says, as Rashi says, Mishabou Ledin, Osur Ledayonim Livtzoya. That once the Balei came Ledin, we're not allowed to make a pshara. It's a whole arichas in the Gemara. The Gemara then says, "V'chol ha'mevarches haboitzeya hareze minaetz." Somebody that praises, somebody that makes a pshara, is like chas v'sholom and niutz klape mailo shenemar uboitzeya berech nietz Hashem elo yikov hadin esahar. The din should puncture the mountain. Shenemar ki hamishpit lelokim hu. V'chein Moshe hoya oimer, Yikov hadin esahar, Aval Aharon, oyev sholem, v'roidev sholem, umesim sholem ben adam l'chaveroi, shenemar, Toras emes hoisa b'fiu, v'avlo loy nimtza b'svosov, b'sholem u'b'mishor holach iti, v'rabim heishiv miyovim. So Rashi says, Aval Aharon, kivin shehoya shemeh, machlokes beineim, so he made sure that it shouldn't come to a din. Taisa says, Aval Aaron, Aaron's role wasn't the role of Dayonos. He was allowed to make psharis. He was allowed to make shalom between the Balei Dinim. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make psharis. And he said, Yikov hadin esahar. What's the har that we're talking about? Yikov hadin esahar. What mountain? So probably this connects with what it's mavur in Svarim, that har is the symbol of Ava. Avram koroi har. And therefore Moshe says, Yikov hadin esahar. That the din has to rule, and the din punctures the har. Yikov hadin esahar. But Aaron is the oyev shalom v'roidev shalom. His midah is the midah of har, and the din is not noikev the har, and therefore Aaron dies and he's covered in the hor hahor, and Moshe is covered in the guy. Okay, now the mabul, came because mola haaretz chamos. Loy nechtam gzar dinam elo al ha gezel. So how is this corrected? How did the world have a rebirth? So there's a medrash in the medrash Tilim, Parsha Lamed Zayin. It says like this: Kisha Omar Avraham leMalki Tzedek, is Shem, the son of Noach. He said to him, Keitzad yotzosem min hateva. How did you get out of the teva? Meaning to say that obviously, just because they wouldn't be able to get out of the teva if it wasn't that they corrected the sins of the Dor HaMabul. So he asks them, he asks Shane ben Noach, Ketzad Yotzosim in Ateva, and he says, Amaloi b'tzedakah shehoyinu oisim. In the schus of the tzedakah that we did. Amaloi Avram, v'chi ma tzedakah yodachem lasis. What kind of tzedakah did you do? V'chi aniyim hoyu shom, were there poor people in the Teva? V'aloi loy hayisem shom elo Noach ubanov. V'al mi hayisem oisim tzedakah. Who did you do tzedakah for? Amaloi al hachaya, v'habehema, v'ha'oif. We fed the chayas and the behemoths and the oif. That was the tzedakah that we did in the Teva. Lo hayinu yeshenim kol halayla. We didn't sleep all night. Elo hayinu noisnim lifnei zeh v'lifnei zeh. Pam achas icharnu. Once we were late, v'yotza avi meshubar. Noach was hurt, as Chazal say. So it was through the chesed and the giving, which is the opposite of the taking of Mola Haaretz Chamos, that they renewed the world. And they came out of the Teva, and they were Zeiche to Olam Chodosh Ra'ah, as Chazal say. So, it's no wonder, Lefizeh, that the end of the Mabul is expressed in Niru Roshe HaHorim, because Horim is an expression of Ava, like Avraham Shekoroi Har. And this happens Ba'asiri Ba'echod Lachodesh, on Rosh Chodesh Av, which is the day that after many generations, Aharon completed his mission in this world, the mission of Oyev Sholom V'Roidev Sholom, Oyev Es Habrius U'Mekarven L'Torah. In other words, that he ensured that the Hor should remain intact, and there shouldn't be a need for Yikoiv Hadin Es HaHor. And on that day, he died and he was buried on Hor HaHor Vayom Hashem Aharon B'Rosh HaHor. So you know that Mishenichnes Av Mematin B'Simcha. And that's because of the Churban Habayis that was in this month. But the Miut Simcha begins from Rosh Chodesh. What does it have to do with Rosh Chodesh? Maybe the bias that was the Beis Hamikdash. What was the Indian of the Beis Hamikdash? The Rambam says in the Sefer Mitzvahs, Mitzvahs Seichov, ve'elov tiyeh hahalicha, that besides for the avodah that was done in the Beis Hamikdash, ve'elov tiyeh hahalicha, v'ha'aliyah l'regel, v'ha'kibutz b'chol shana v'shana. It was a place where Klal Yisrael gathered. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim in the end of Perek Memvov says, Mashi yagia la'odam min ha'kibutz ahu. What people benefited from that kibbutz, mihischadesh ha'torah, b'hifol l'sahu, v'hisahev b'nei odom, v'chevra k'tzosam el k'tzosam, and the ava that it brought between individuals and groups, the Rambam says that's obvious. So one of the roles that were played by the Beis Hamikdash is bringing about the his ahev b'nei odom v'chevra k'tzosam al k'tzosam, as the Rambam says in the Sefer Mitzvahs, the kibbutz. So the mikdash was the makom of avodah, which the Zohar refers to as pulchine d'rechimusa, the avodah of ahava. That's the ahava bein odom l'makom, which was performed through the zera Aharon, which is the midah of chesed and ahava. But it was also a place of kibbutz and ava between people, as it's before in Rashi and Shabbos, that, you know, that kol HaTorah is included in v'haftu yach kamoicha. That v'haftu yach kamoicha has two meanings. It has the meaning of reyacha v'reya avicha, which is the Rebbeinu Shalom. It has the meaning of reyacha on this in the simple sense, and these two avos are connected to each other, because in as much as a person has the ability to exit his selfish self, he sees the Rebbeinu Shalom and he sees others. So that was all part of what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, the Mikdash is on the Har HaMoiriyah. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Beis Abchira, Perek Vav Halacha Yud, Bezdin sherotzu lahoisif al Yerushalayim, or lahoisif al ha'azora, moisifin. So that's a halacha. Here's in the Mishnah that Bezdin could be moisif al ha'ir va'al ha'azora. But the Rambam writes, v'yesh lohem limshoich ha'azora ad mokem sheyirtzu mei har habayis. The limshoy chaymes Yerushalayim ad makom sheyirtzu. So the chaymes Yerushalayim they could put however far they want, but the azara they could only bring it to the end of the Har Habayis, but not beyond. So why is this? The Or Sameach is marich with Rayas over there that the azara can't be extended beyond the Har Habayis. And he writes over there, V'remes godel l'zeh mikra molei, Bahar Hashem yiroeh, zo bahar. The levad ahor ein rishus l'hoisif. The azara has to be bahar. Ubetargum shel posik bahar nachlasecha goyme mikdosh aleph daled nun yud koinenu yodecha. It says in the Targum, Betura da'achsantoch asar moskon lebeis shchinosach. Umefurish kanal that the Mokim HaMikdash has to be on the Har, and therefore the Azorah cannot be extended beyond the Har. So, based on what we're saying, I mean, since the Beis HaMikdash is the place for the Pulchana de Rechimusa, the Avodah of Ahava through the Zera Aharon, which are the Ish Chasidecha, and it's the place for his Ahev Ktsosam B'Ktsosam. So it's Shayach Davke Tahar, which is the symbol of Ahava. Now Rosh Chodesh of Aaron died. He was the Ohev Shalom, V'Roidev Shalom, Ohev Esabriyas Mechavan L'Torah. In Parashas Chukas it says, Vayarkol ha'edo ki gova Aharon, vayivku es Aharon goymer, kol beis Yisrael. Rashi says, kol beis Yisrael ha'anoshim v'hanoshim. Lefi shehoya Aharon oyev shalom v'roidev shalom, umatil ahava bein balei meriva, ubein ish le'ishtoi. So, could be that this bechi, this crying, this for the over the passing of the Roidev Sholem and the Matil Ava is also the foundation of the fact that this time of the year is a time of miut simcha that comes mikoyach the Churban Beis Hamikdash, which came about through sinas china. But it has another meaning in the sense of hakdomas refuah lamaka, because there's a famous expression when a tzaddik passes, Shavak Chaim L'chol Chai. He left life for all the living, which means that when a tzaddik passes, he gives from the life that he lived to the living. That connects with the Gemara says that nitilasa kenesinosa, somebody that's tani umasni. Shishim riboy is the shir for his levaya because nitilasa kenesinosa, which means that in the Netilasa, there's a Matan Torah. As it says in Malachim Beis, that when Elisha asked to get Pishnayim, Beruchoi Shel Eliyahu, Eliyahu answers him, Hiksheso Lishoil, Im Tira Oisi, Lukach Me'itcha, Yehilecha Kain, V'im Loi, V'im Ayin Lo Yiyeh. So the being there, when he's lukach me'itoch, that enables him to receive pishnayim in the spirit of Eliyahu. The Gemara in Ksubas Daf Kuf Gimel says that Abaska went out and said, "Man dahava ba'ashkavtei de Rebbe mezuman l'chai olam haba." And the Gemara tells us. So you see, first of all, Man dahava ba'ashkavtei de Rebbe mezuman l'chai olam haba. Rebbe wasn't able to give his generation the readiness for chai olam haba during his lifetime, but with his passing, Man dahava ba'ashkavtei de Rebbe became mezuman l'chayei olam haba. The Gemara tells us over there that ahu koives kol yoyma have ka'osi kamei. He would come before Rebbe every day. Ahu yoyma lo yasa. That day he didn't. Given the shama hachi, he heard the baskol that whoever was ba'ashkavtei de Rebbe is mezuman l'chayei olam haba. He felt terrible. Salik le'igra. He went up to the roof. V'nofal la'aromis, and he fell to the ground and he died. Yahrtzeit abaska v'amra afahu koives. The koives is also mezuman l'chayei olam haba, which means that anybody that the passing of Rabbeinu HaKadosh touched him profoundly had an aliyah through that, and he became an olam haba. So also through the Vayivku es Aharon, Kol Beis Yisrael. So through the pain and the gaguim that they had to the one that was Matil Ava Ben Bali Meriva, they received from the Midah of Aharon the ability to overcome Sinas Chinam. That is the Siba for the Churban Habayis during this time. And Memela, when we're mischazik in Hatolas Ava Ben Bali Meriva and Redifas Sholem, we'll zoiche that Yehovchu Yomim Eile L'Sosoinu L'Simche L'Moyadim Toivim, and will restore the Ava, and Memela will restore the Beis Hamikdash, and Yehovchu Yomim Eilu L'Sosoinu L'Simche. Now, you know, the Rambam in Hilchos Chanukah, Perek Gimel, Halacha Yud Beis, says, Minei Kriyas HaHalal, B'yemei Chachamim Horishonim Kach Hoya. How did they say Halal? Achash Shemavorach Hagodel Shemakrias HaHalal. If to the Shliach Tzibur, the Godel that's Makrias HaHalal would make the bracha. Maschil v'oime halaluka. V'chol ha'am oinen halaluka. V'choyze v'oime halalu avdi Hashem. V'chol ha'am oinen halaluka. V'choyze v'oime. Everything he says, the tzibur answers halaluka. V'chein al kol dover v'dover. Yeah. At shenimtzu oinen b'chol halil halaluka. In every halal, they answered halaluka meya v'sholosh v'esrim pamim, 123 times. Simen l'dover shnois of shalar. The simen is shnois of shalar, and Aaron lived 123 years. No, I mean, so is there any connection between the fact that Aaron lived 123 years and the amount of times that we answer halaluka and halal? But you know, the Gemara in Saita compares the Kriyas Hamakra and the Aniyas HaKol in Halal to the way the Shira was said by the Yam, Al Yidei Moshe B'nai Yisrael. Moshe Amar Ashir LaHashem, V'hein Oimrim Ashir LaHashem. Moshe Amar Ki Go Yigo, V'hein Oimrim Ashir LaHashem. Al Kol Davar, everything that Moshe said, they answered Ashir LaHashem. And so in Halal, we answer Halaluka on Kol Davar V'Davar. Yeah, there's a whole discussion why we don't do this anymore. But now, in the Shira Sayam, it says, Oz Yoshim Moshe V'nei Yisrael Sashira Azois Vayomru Leimer Ashir LaHashem. Says the Orachaim HaKodesh, She'omru Zeh Lo Zeh Leimer, Pirush She'yomru Yachad, V'loi Shum Ishtanas V'Hafroda, Ad She'yiu Ki'ish Echad, Hagam HaYoisam Rabim, V'omrar Ashira, Loshin Yochid, Ki'ilu Heim Ish Echad, She'zula Zeh Hayu Oimir Noshira. So they decided to do it in unison, to do it together, and that's why it says Ashira Ki'ish Echad. So the Aniyah, the Kriya, and the Aniyah is really about the Achdus of Ki'ish Echad. So it's no wonder that the amount of Aniyahs in Halal is like the Minyan Shnois of Shalaran, who during his lifetime instilled in Klal Yisrael the midah of Oyev Shalom, V'roidev Shalom, Matil Ava Ben Bali Meriva, and Mamela in this time of the year when we mourn the Churban Beis Hamikdash Avad. It's not just about mourning, but it's about doing what it takes to restore the Beis Hamikdash, and that has to do with Matil Ava. Yeah, that reaching out to others and being mischazik in the midah of Aaron Hakohen, Oyev Shalom, V'roidev Shalom, Matil Ava Ben Bali Meriva. Okay, Rabbi Say, I wish you all a good Shabbos.